What if I told you this tiny solar setup costs about $5 and can actually power something useful? Not a full house, not some fake unlimited free electricity nonsense. I'm talking about a real low-cost solar test that a lot of people would normally scroll past and assume is either a scam, a toy, or completely useless. So today, I'm putting that idea to the test. I bought a super cheap mini solar setup, and the goal is simple. Find out if something this small can do anything real. Can it power a device? Can it charge something? Can it actually produce enough usable energy to matter? Or is this just another internet trick that sounds amazing until you actually try it? Because this is where people get curious fast. Everybody loves the idea of solar power. The sun is free, electricity bills are not. And the second people hear cheap solar, their brain immediately jumps to one question. Wait, can this actually save money? That's exactly why this kind of test gets attention. It hits three things at once. It's cheap, it's simple, and if it works even a little, people instantly start imagining bigger possibilities. So here's the setup. This is not some giant rooftop system. This is a tiny, low-cost solar panel setup that almost looks too small to be taken seriously. The kind of thing you'd see online and think, no way that powers anything useful. But that's what makes this fun, because low expectations create the best reveals. If this thing does nothing, we'll know fast. If it works, that's where it gets interesting. Now before we start, let's get one thing straight. A cheap solar panel like this is not going to run your air conditioner, your refrigerator, or your house. That's not what this test is about. This is about small power, real power, but small, the kind that could run an LED, charge a phone a little, power a fan, or keep a tiny USB device alive under the right conditions. And honestly, that's still enough to matter. Because once something crosses from gimmick into actually useful, people look at it differently. It stops being a toy and starts becoming a tool. So the first thing I want to know is whether this panel is even producing measurable power, because a lot of cheap gear looks good in the ad and disappoints in real life. So I'm putting it under direct sunlight and checking the output. And right away, this is where the video gets good, because it is producing power. Not theoretical power, not maybe if the conditions are perfect power. I mean real output. Right now, from a panel, most people would laugh at for being too cheap to matter. That changes the whole mood instantly. Now the question becomes bigger. If it's generating something, what can it actually do with it? So first, I'm trying one of the easiest loads, a small LED light. This is usually the quickest way to tell whether you're dealing with fake promise or usable energy. If it can't do something simple, there's no point pretending it's useful. The connection is on, and there it is. The light comes to life. That is the first real payoff. Because once people see actual output turning into actual function, the setup suddenly feels real. Tiny? Yes. Limited? Yes. But real. And this is why these tests hold attention so well. The viewer starts with doubt. Then they see proof. Then their mind starts racing ahead. If it can light this, can it run something bigger? If it can power that, can it charge this? If it works in full sun, how much does it drop in shade? People stop watching passively and start mentally testing the setup themselves. So let's push it further. A light is nice, but people really want to know whether it can do something they care about. So now I'm testing a USB-powered device. Something small, something realistic, because this is where cheap solar either earns respect or gets exposed. If this works, even partially, then we're no longer in novelty territory. We're in useful territory. I connect the device, angle the panel toward better sunlight, and wait. This is the tension moment, because cheap products live or die right here. The promise is over. Now it's just reality. And yes, it works. Not like a wall outlet, not like a premium battery bank, but it is absolutely delivering enough power to run something real under good sunlight. That's the kind of result people underestimate until they actually see it happen. And once they do, the entire idea of small solar starts feeling way more practical than they expected. This is the first big reason videos like this can take off. They challenge assumptions. Most people think of solar in extremes. Either it's a massive, expensive home installation, or it's a useless gadget that does nothing. But this sits in the middle. It's cheap enough to be approachable and useful enough to be interesting. That middle zone is where curiosity explodes. Now let's talk honestly about the limits, because that's what makes the test more credible. This setup depends heavily on sunlight. Strong, direct sunlight makes a huge difference. Change the angle, pass a cloud overhead, move into shade, and the output drops. That's not a flaw in this setup. That's just how solar works. So if someone sees a tiny panel like this and expects stable, wall outlet level performance no matter what, they're going to be disappointed. But if the expectation is small, free power for small devices, then suddenly this becomes a lot more impressive. That's the key, not fantasy. Utility. And honestly, that's more interesting than fake hype. Because the internet is full of ridiculous energy claims, unlimited power, secret hacks, infinite electricity from random junk. Most of it falls apart the second you test it. But something like this doesn't need to pretend to be bigger than it is. The win here is that it actually works at all. A tiny cheap panel, real sunlight, real output, real device, real result. That combination is satisfying. Now I want to see how consistent it feels. So I reposition the panel again, optimize the angle, and watch how the device responds. This part matters because solar isn't just about having a panel, it's about placement. A small change in angle can mean a noticeable change in output, especially on a budget setup where every bit of efficiency matters. And that's where people usually learn the second big lesson. The panel is only half the story. The setup matters too. Angle matters. Sunlight strength matters. Wire quality matters. Connections matter. The device you're trying to power matters. That's why one person says, these cheap solar panels are useless, while another says, mine works great. Sometimes they're not even testing the same way. One is expecting too much. The other is matching the tool to the job. And that is exactly how you should think about a $5 setup like this, not as a miracle. As a niche tool, a really interesting, very cheap niche tool. And that brings us to the third reason this kind of video performs well. It gives people possibility without demanding a huge commitment. That's powerful. A full solar installation feels expensive, technical, and out of reach for most people. A $5 experiment feels accessible. It feels like something they could try themselves without risk. And whenever viewers feel like they could actually replicate what they're watching, engagement goes up, comments go up, shares go up. Because the video stops feeling like entertainment only. It starts feeling like an idea. Now imagine the practical uses people immediately start thinking about. Emergency light backup, a tiny camping setup, a garden device, a small fan in hot weather, keeping a little USB gadget running outdoors, charging something slowly when there's no outlet nearby. No, this doesn't replace your electric company. But it doesn't have to. If it handles one useful job for almost no cost, that alone is enough to make it worth attention. And I think that's what surprises people most. Not that the setup has limits. Of course it has limits. The surprise is that something this cheap crosses the line from novelty into function. That's the moment the whole video becomes satisfying. Because in the beginning, the setup looks like a joke. By the end, it looks like a legit tiny power solution. Now let's do the final reality check. Would I use this to power my whole life? Obviously not. Would I rely on it as my only energy source? No chance. Would I call it useless? Also no. And that's the whole point. This cheap solar setup is not fake. It's not magic. It's a small, sunlight-dependent, low-power system that can actually do real things if you use it for the right job. That's a much better result than most people expect when they hear $5 solar. And that's what makes the reveal land. Because the panel looked too small. The price sounded too low. The promise felt too weak to matter. And yet here we are, with actual power doing actual work. That is the kind of result people remember. So if you've ever wondered whether those tiny budget solar setups are complete junk or secretly underrated, this should answer it. They're not miracle machines, but they are a lot more capable than people think. And once you see a cheap little panel pull real energy out of sunlight and turn it into something useful, the idea stops sounding silly. It starts sounding smart. So now the real question is not whether this $5 solar setup can power something. It can. The real question is, what else can it power next?